Hello, everyone. This is Sincere, a Teacher Sincere's channel, and welcome once again. So it's been about a week, and I'm finally back. I wanted to thank my new subscribers. I noticed the other day that I had finally gone over 400, and I was so surprised because it seemed like I was just stuck in the 300s, and I was never going to get out of the 300s. So I was really surprised to see that I've gone over 400. So thank you very much for subscribing to my channel. And my channel is, I've mostly changed it to where it's going to be just mostly about books, and I may do some little historical pieces about some unusual or some little known people in history or events, or, things like that. But yeah, so welcome to my channel. So I finally finished up a book this week, and I've decided to try to stick to 2 books at a time. So I'm still diligently working at St. Augustine City of God. So this week, what I actually finished up was Moreira Asmar's Memoirs, Memoirs of a Babylonian Princess, okay, Volume 1. So I finished Volume 1 this week, finally. And I really did like it. I gave it a 5-star rating on Goodreads. And this book was written by, like I said, Moreira Asmar. She was a Christian woman who was born in 1804 in what is now Iraq. Iraq at that time was Mesopotamia, still considered Mesopotamia, and it was part of the Ottoman Empire, ruled by the Turks. And Moreira Asmar grew up in a Chaldean Christian family. And so the book is her memoir. Book 1 here is basically talking about, she gives her family background, some of the background. They originated, she said, like 300 years before in India. Her family migrated from India to Persia, now modern day Iran, and then they ended up in Iraq and in the area of Nineveh. If you read your Bible, you probably have heard about Nineveh. And so Nineveh is mentioned a number of times in the Bible. So, but I gave it a 5-star rating. And she talks about her family, like I said, and, basically they were at peace with their Muslim neighbors, but there were a couple of incidents that eventually ended up in her father first losing all of his wealth, then regaining his wealth. And then he ended up, being persecuted again. He ended up dead. Her father was called Emir Abdullah Asmar. Okay, so they were wealthy and affluent people. And after the death of her father and the loss of her family, she ended up traveling to Baghdad, where she tried to establish a school for women and girls. And she ended up being sort of cheated out of her school by this unscrupulous European guy. So she then went on to stay with Bedouins, and basically what she did to her life, she traveled around the Middle East. She traveled around what is now Turkey, Jordan, Lebanon, all parts of the Ottoman Empire, basically what we call the Levant, Syria. And she talks a lot about the culture, the attitudes. She herself was a very devout Christian. She had even considered possibly becoming a nun, taking vows to become a nun and lead a life of chastity. But I don't think she actually did that. Okay. But I'm going to go on to part 2. Okay. This is part 2. I finally got part 2. I had part 1 or volume 1 for quite some time. And then about 2 months ago, I ended up ordering part 2. Okay. And I've shown it before, but the inside is basically a facsimile of the original publication that was published back in the 1840s. Okay. So she was a traveler. She lived a very extraordinary life. And the book is sort of, it's sort of like an adventure story, talking about the culture, the attitudes, all of that, her own attitudes. And it's quite interesting. It's not boring by any means. But yeah, so I finished that up this week, and I'm going to talk a little bit about a few more books and a few more things I've acquired. Well, I've decided that I had mentioned previously that I had planned to read Edward Said's memoir, Out of Place, but I'm going to put him a little bit on the back burner. What I'm doing right now is, excuse me, I'm going to continue. I started reading Margaret Walker's Jubilee. Okay. Margaret Walker was an African American writer. She only wrote one book of fiction. And this book is set during the antebellum times, pre-U.S. Civil War times. And it's a story of Veri, who is the daughter of a black slave and her white slave master. And so, yeah, I haven't gotten very far in the book. I'm only like on page 32. So I'm going to be focusing mostly on this book. The book is set in my state, Georgia. I live in the state of Georgia. And let's see, what does it say on the back? Does it say anything? Yeah. Let's see, here's a classic and true story of Veri. So she based the story on her family history. The story of a white plantation owner and his black mistress, a Southern Civil War heroine to rival Scarlett O'Hara. Veri bears witness to the South's antebellum opulence and to its brutality, its wartime ruin, and the promises of reconstruction. Jubilee is a story that Margaret Walker heard as a child from her grandmother, the real Veri's daughter. Weaving her family's oral history with 30 years of research, Walker has brought the true and everyday experiences of slaves to millions of readers around the world, black and white, young and old, and so on. So yeah, so I'm going to be reading this. I'm going to have to hurry with it because it's actually a library book. I actually started out reading it on the Libby Library app for the public libraries. And so yeah, I used to read when I was this is sort of going back to my teenage years. When I was a teenager, you used to, if you went to the bookstores or went to particularly the newsstand, okay? The newsstand would have like these, novels, these sort of, I don't know what you call pulp fiction or whatever, but they would be like these, novels set during, slavery. And I got into those. I shouldn't even been reading them at my age, some of the stuff that was going on in some of them. But yeah, I used to read those. So this is sort of carrying me back to when I was an older teenager, when I read, like, I remember one of them I read was Mandingo, the movie. They made a movie about it. Certainly should have been reading that one. I had some other ones as well that I read, but yeah, this is sort of bringing me back to then. I don't know if this one is going to be as juicy as those, but I shouldn't have been reading at my age, at those time, but at that time, but yeah, but Jubilee, I'm going to be working on Jubilee. And then, I'm going to go on after that. I will go and finish, after I finish it, I will go to part 2 of, Memoirs of a Babylonian Princess. So I'm going to be just talk about a couple of little books I have here. And just saw a very tiny little book haul. I ended up, I got these both used. This one is called The Journey, Memoirs of an Egyptian Woman Student in America. And this was by Radwer Asher. Now, Radwer Asher was an Egyptian writer. And I read her novel Granada that was set in medieval, well, it was really not really 15th century Spain, during the Reconquista of Spain from the Spanish, conquered, Spain from the Moors, around 1492 at that time. And so, I read her novel, Granada. And so this one is like a very short memoir, very short, about her experiences, studying here in the United States. Radwer Asher actually got her PhD from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst in African American Studies. Okay, so she was an Egyptian lady that got her, and she's a famous writer in the Middle East, that actually got her PhD in African American Studies, and I find that very fascinating. So, and I just was looking at it a little bit. I saw W.E.B. Du Bois mentioned in here. But yeah, she was also married to a famous Palestinian writer and poet named Morid Bagati. And he died a couple of years ago. She died back in 2014, I believe, of cancer. And they had one child who is also a poet, like his father. But yeah, I have this book, and then I have her book. I think it's The Woman from Tantura. So my reading is just going one reason why my reading is such a mess. I can tell you, I'll make a confession. One reason why it's such a mess and I'm so slow is because I have a tendency after working during the day to listen to podcasts. And I like to listen to geopolitical podcasts, or I will listen to podcasts that's related to Christianity. I'll look at some book channels. And so a lot of times when I should be reading, I'm actually listening to podcasts. So that is why my reading is suffering. So I need to do better. I'm trying to get myself back on track. I really got into listening to a lot of podcasts. I was already doing it previous to the war in Gaza, but I really got into it recently because I follow a lot of people, different people that are independent journalists, some American, some not American, some Jewish, some not, some Arab. I listen to the like whole spectrum to get a big perspective. And so that's one reason why my reading is actually suffering, because I'm actually listening to podcasts at night when I should be reading. And the thing is about reading, you have to be pretty focused. So it's kind of easier for me just to listen than to actually just go and focus in on reading after a long day. It's just kind of hard, but I'm trying to do better. The next book I got is by an Israeli writer named Sami Michael, called A Trumpet in the Wadi. Okay. Now, Sami Michael was actually born in Iraq. His original name before he moved to Israel was Kamal Salah. Okay. And I had never heard of him before, but if you look at my earlier video, two previous videos, 2 videos down, maybe I could say, I learned about him through Professor Avi Slim's memoirs, Memoirs of an Arab Jew, and he mentioned him. Now, Sami Michael was one of the first Israelis to say that that it should be a two-state solution, That it shouldn't. He was very, in some ways, I guess, very pro-Palestinian. And actually, this book is actually the story of it's actually about the love story between a Russian Jew and an Arab Christian woman. Okay. I had not planned to get A Trumpet in the Wadi, but because the book that Professor Slim mentioned in his memoir was called Victoria, and which caused, he said, quite a big controversy. Victoria did, but Victoria, the price was just like, it just totally absorbent, just huge. Okay, like running $200 or whatever. So this one, A Trumpet in the Wadi, and there's another one that were actually very affordable. So I got this one, got it for maybe about $7 or $8. It's almost like new. It's got some markings on it, not very long. Okay, and so this is what I got by Sami Michael. He was quite a rebel, apparently. Okay, anti-Zionist. And like Professor Slim, he was born in Iraq, in Baghdad. And lastly, you know, I'm a big, or if you watch my videos, you know, I'm a big notebook and journal lover. I was just out shopping the other day at Dollar Tree, okay? And I was really surprised to find these little notebooks that are just me. Okay. It's like they just know this is Sincere Ray. She's going to come here and buy this. Okay. This is they have these little jot journals, JOT jot. And this one, if you look, it's got little books here, and the books has got art, poetry, history. And it's got like little kettle, teapot, candles, cup of tea. Yeah. And this is with the jot sticker. This is without it. Okay, it's very, very little cheap little notebook. This is what it looks like inside. The lines are like the color of this color, like here, and it's just a little cheap thing, but it's so cute. It's got flowers, mushrooms, cup of coffee, moon, and then I was just struck. I mean, art, poetry, and history. That's my kind of thing. Here it is, right? Can you see it? I don't know if you can see it. I turned it. Yeah. And I've been writing poetry lately too, so working on some things with poetry. So I will probably bring that up in a future video when I've sort of gotten that out of the way, whenever I can get to that. But I've been writing some poetry lately. I love poetry and I enjoy writing poetry as well. But so that's that. I just want to do just a quick video talking about what I've read recently. There's a YouTube channel called ParkNotes. Okay, and I'll put the link in the description. He explained, which I had often thought about. This is a great way to read a book. Okay, I've never read as an adult, read a book. I have read some books. I have read some books in 2 or 3 days. I've never sat down like some people or read a long book. They can read a fairly long book in 1 day. I just can't do that. I become too mentally overloaded if I do. But I will, read, like I might read a Japanese graphic novel and do it in a couple of days or something like that. But he was talking about how you can actually divide up your book, a book, and to like take the pages, divide it into by 7, whatever the pages, how many pages the book has, and then you can like read a book in a week. Okay, so I was thinking that I probably might do like the 2-week method, divide it up like 14 days or something like that, and then see, can I read a book in about 14 days? Because a lot of times the books, I will love a book, and I will be reading it entirely too long. You would think that, oh, she must hate that book because it's taking her forever to read it. No, it's just a matter of, work and mental exhaustion. And like I said, the podcast is sort of getting in the way. Okay. I've gotten unfocused off my reading, and I need to do the podcast, sort of push the podcast aside, maybe to after I do my reading. But I've got to get more disciplined with my reading because I'm behind on the Goodreads reading challenge, but I'm not really doing that. I have it up on my Goodreads page, but I'm not really following that because, as I said earlier in the video, I don't feel like reading should be like a contest. It should be something that you enjoy doing. So yeah. But anyway, I'm going to finish and end here. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. And once again, thanks to my new subscribers. So I'm going to end here. So this is Sincere. Until next time.